got science, we got maths, you're staying up to class.
Everything in this world is made up of matter.
Hello, it's 6:10 p.m. and this is iScience Radio. That was our jingle, which is a chunk of Got Science by Gecko. You should check him out. I'm Polly and welcome to the show. It's Monday the 7th of December 2020. For a minute there I was worried I hadn't changed the date on the Google Doc, but it is indeed Monday the 7th of December. This show is run by science communication students from Imperial College London. We chat about all things science with a different theme each week. This week's theme is science and religion. I'm really excited to say that we've got several guests with us today, not all in the studio at the same time, don't worry, we're very COVID secure, but I can see a few of them just outside through the glass, which is very exciting. And in other big news, I have to give a huge shout out to our listener Sophie, who you might have heard me mention before, because Sophie fixed all of our internet problems just now, so thank you Sophie, big round of applause to her. Okay then, so one of our guests this week, which I'm sure you'll all be very excited to hear, is Keegan, live in person. Hello, Keegan.
Hello. Oh, yeah, I'm sure they're over the moon.
I'm sure they are. You know, you left us hanging for 1 week and everyone was desperate to hear your news, and now we get to hear it live.
Yeah, it's nice to be around actual people, not sat in my bedroom.
Yes, exactly. So Keegan studied biology before doing this course, and over to Keegan with the news.
Hey, so today I wanted to talk about a company called DeepMind, which is a sort of, I don't know what the technical term is, it's like a child company of Google. So Google's got a few companies under it. One of them is called Calico, which is an anti-aging research unit, which is pretty cool in itself. Anyway, so DeepMind makes AI for various different things, and they're most famous for making sort of game AI. So you might have heard of Go or StarCraft, which is a real-time strategy game, and then they put their AI up against the best in the world and see how it does.
Do they usually win?
Yeah, so they beat all the world champions and things, which is kind of funny. And so the newest one's called AlphaFold, which is one for predicting how proteins are going to fold. And every 2 years there's this, it's not officially a competition, but it's sort of seen as one, called the Critical Assessment of Techniques for Protein Structure Prediction Methods.
Oh, catchy.
Or CASP for short. And so DeepMind put their AlphaFold AI up against that, and their category for how good it is comparing it to lab techniques. And everyone was shocked when this AI was as good or better than current lab techniques, where you get trained professionals in a lab doing all sorts of complicated stuff. And their AI... Ooh, hello. And their AI was able to do it as good or better. So there's a massive leap forward in biology, because there's a field called drug design where you design drugs to target specific parts of the cell, but now this opens up a whole new world of protein design. If people know what something's going to turn into with this AI, you can maybe design proteins or enzymes for breaking down plastic and things like that. So yeah, super exciting.
That makes me think about protein folding in things like Alzheimer's dementia.
Yeah.
Because that's obviously a build-up of different proteins in the brain. So I suppose if we could design an enzyme to break down those proteins, I mean, this is thinking way ahead, but could be a possible application.
Yeah, I mean, like almost all human diseases, unlike infectious diseases, are proteins going wrong. So if this AI can predict the difference in shape, you know, you might be able to find out whole new aspects of a disease that you never even thought about before. So, yeah.
And what do you think about AI and kind of self-awareness? And because that's what I think about when I think about AI. Do you think it's scary, or do you embrace it, Keegan?
Yeah, that's the kind of pop sci thing people love to talk about. I mean, I don't really know. I feel like the AIs they make are very specific in their function. You know, this one only knows about proteins, and that's all it knows how to do. It doesn't know about bombs or, you know, anything like that. I still think it has quite a long way to go. But the potential for that, yeah, pretty scary, isn't it? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it can, well, hopefully it can fold proteins to human destruction. I can't really see the pathway of how that would work.
A death test tube or something, yeah.
Yeah, well, you never know. Wow, great. That's very interesting. I mentioned to you before the show, I did see that pop up on my Facebook feed, but I hadn't bothered to click on it. So there you go. If anyone else listening had the same thing happen, now you know what the news story was about. Thank you very much, Keegan.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
So, as I mentioned earlier that this week's theme is science and religion. So we've got several of our fab course mates on the show today, and Lily and I met with our colleagues Ushashi and Fatima earlier in the week to kick off our discussions. So let's have a listen to that.
Welcome.
Hello.
Would you two mind introducing yourselves very briefly, your religious identity and how that intersects with your kind of scientific identity? Ushashi, do you want to go first?
So I'm Mashashi, as you already heard. I'm currently studying science communication at Imperial College London, and I recently graduated with a degree in biochemistry in June this year. I've always been really interested in the sciences, specifically biology and chemistry, like since we were introduced to it in school. And it's always been fascinating. And my mom studied botany, and she undertook giving me biology lessons or helping me with homework. So we would constantly talk, and we would go out on walks, and she would just point to things, trees specifically, and explain things to me. So I've always seen the world through her botany eyes. And she happens to be an atheist. But I grew up in a very mixed household, so I identify as an agnostic person just because of how many different beliefs and people and their cultures that I've seen. I've kind of weighed out everything, and having been a person of science all my life, I realized that being agnostic was what aligned with my worldview the best.
Lovely. Fatima?
I love that. And I just have to say that biochemistry to me is just the hardest thing, because you have the complexity of chemistry and then just how much biology there is. It always terrified me, so I'm extremely impressed right now.
Thank you.
So I'm Fatima. I studied biomedical sciences at the University of Sheffield, so that was nowhere near as intense as biochemistry. It was just straightforward human biology, no plants, no animals, unless they were model organisms, just about how the body worked. A lot of neuroscience and anatomy, but a little bit of everything that, apart from maybe microbiology. I am a Shia Muslim, which is a sort of minority Muslim to be. I'm kind of niche, I'm kind of hipster. The main difference between a sort of regular Sunni Muslim would be that Sunnis believe that the Prophet Muhammad was the final message from God, whereas we believe that his ancestors afterwards for 12 generations, though they weren't prophets, they were imams, which means that they still carried on and kind of embodied the message of Islam. So we kind of have more teachings, if you will, and more examples on how to live our life, because we have 12 generations worth of, practice and messages and stuff beyond the Prophet and the Quran and all the previous prophets. I'd say I'd live in a fairly scientific household. My mum is a pharmacy technician, and my sister is studying pharmacy. My cousins are doctors. We kind of have that, typical Asians, pharmacy, medicine, engineers, all that jazz. So I don't think it's ever really come up as a sort of contradiction within our lives. I think that there's only a limit as to how far science can go back into, until you have that sort of uncaused cause, or a sort of, there's only so far as you can go back before you have sort of any ethical parameters. You kind of have to come up with that on your own or follow something in particular. I don't think science provides you particularly with ethical parameters in itself. I think for me, science is a way to understand the world, but just because I believe that God created the world doesn't mean I don't also believe that the Big Bang happened and that there's, thousands and thousands of years of history. And yeah, I don't see those things in conflict as such. In Islam, human beings are meant to be guardians of the earth. It's called Khalifa. I'm sure someone can correct me on listener if that's wrong with my pronunciation, but it's basically because you're meant to be a guardian of the earth. I kind of see science as an extension of that almost, because, for example, as we practice science, we learn more about how we're causing climate change. And I think that goes hand in hand with this idea that we're meant to be protecting and looking after the earth and respecting it. So I just kind of see science as a tool in which to fulfill my sort of spiritual journey. How about you, Ushashi? So when you say agnostic, would you say it was because you saw so many ideas present that you were I don't see a particular one standing out? Because obviously both of my parents have the same, Shia faith, so I didn't really have any contradictions. So what do you mean with agnostic?
So by agnostic, I feel like I've always kind of believed in what I see with my two eyes. I've always been very supportive of that. And it's kind of the analogy is similar to, high school rumors, where someone's going to come up with a random rumor about you and you're just who said that? How do you know it's true? That's not who I am. Who told you that, right? For me, it's something and I don't believe that person unless they show hard and fast proof for the information that they have. And so that's kind of what shaped my opinion. as long as nobody provides me proof with the fact that there is a higher power or something like that, I'm not gonna believe in it, but I will definitely kind of like consider it if there's like proof in black and white, if there's evidence for it, and think about it. And when I see my friends who are strong in their faith and are religious, I like to listen to their views on it. I find it very interesting and I like to respect it. And I'm like, what makes you think like that? You know, how do you come to this conclusion? Why are your beliefs the way they are? It's really interesting to see their worldview, but I try to stand from a partial standpoint where I would like to see evidence for the things people say.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Yeah, no, and I think there's very much like there's that leap of faith involved in you know whatever following a particular religion. I think I often find people who have converted to a religion, they tend to be converted because they're attracted to the ideology or like the people and like the attitudes and the way of living, and you know maybe like a vague idea of I think there's something more, as opposed to like here's this and this and this, because I think the very act of faith comes with believing in something that is unseen, you know, so you're never going to get that complete proof anyway.
One of the reasons I was agnostic was because of people around me that I saw were ridiculously like superstitious, right? One of my grandparents, they're very superstitious, and just the way they see the world confuses me, because I'm like, this is what we see with our own two eyes. How are you arguing it, like refuting it with something that you don't see? And that had nothing to do with believing in God or his teachings. It's something that they came up with, which they personally didn't like, and they would project their beliefs as ideologies of the religion. And I was like, there's several religions who have these ideologies and beliefs that I think are really valuable and important to mankind. But then there's people who pass off weird superstitions that make no sense as something that is like an ideology or a belief in their religion, when that's not where it all started. And there's like scientific proof that, for example, like the taboo around menstruation, right? I'm just like, there's science to prove that this is nothing bad. It's not as natural as digestion, as respiration. Why are you saying that God won't like me because of this? God loves everybody. So yeah, there's some things that I do.
And then he created this, so why are you? Yeah.
Thanks for that. The first part of that discussion, Ushashi and Fatima. I personally find Fatima's discussion of looking after the earth and that relationship with religion really interesting, because I did a placement in New Zealand, a medical placement, and we had to study beforehand different people's cultures there. So the Maori people have a belief about their health being linked to the earth, which I think is quite common with a lot of indigenous populations around the world. So I do think there's an overlap there between religion, spirituality and health specifically. But Keegan, did you have any thoughts on the first part of that interview?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to think of people as guardians of the earth almost. And I think even if you're not religious and you view things very scientifically and biologically, I think that's still holds true. You know, we are natural beings, part of a natural world, and if you want to exist in that natural world, you have to protect it, especially when you have as much influence as humans do. So yeah, and I think the fact that it comes up in lots of different cultures highlights how important it is. Another thing I thought was interesting is people say I am a Christian or I am a Muslim or any these kinds of things, and yet there's a lot of overlap between them all. So I wonder if you looked at lots of different religions and took aspects of each one and sort of acted out parts of different religions, would you still be religious then? Like, what would you call yourself if you respected lots of different religions? So it's interesting to think about.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that you should talk to Ushashi about later, after what she was saying about growing up in lots of different around lots of different religions. I can see her laughing outside. So she's obviously raring to go to discuss that with you, Keegan. Okay, so let's have our first song of the show. It's Fatima's choice, and it's Anybody Out There by Gabrielle Aplin.
Eventually, but I was spinning in the outside my window. Is there anybody out there?
Okay, that was Gabrielle Aplin with Anybody Out There. So welcome back to the show. This week's theme is science and religion, and we've got lots of exciting guests from our course here with us. We're going back to our course mates now, though, who are Fatima and Ushashi, who are kicking off our discussion this week.
Goes on to what Polly was suggesting we move on to, which is that, like, I think that's the main problem with modern religion, is that then that, you know, when you go off track, you can, the colour around it can become against what the religion is actually teaching, or becomes illogical. We even have this like academic tradition in Shia Islam where you have to subscribe, if you will, to a specific scholar's interpretation, and that scholar has to be alive when you are. So for example, my parents are following the scholars. I don't know if he's dead, but he was alive when they were alive, whereas I have to follow somebody different. So there are minute rulings of ours that are different, but this idea that you have to have someone who's living in your time, who's come up with the sort of adaptations for the interpretations to listen to them. And then it's just like, it's very stressful when people look at countries like Saudi Arabia and say this is a Muslim country, and I'm like, is it though, or is it just like an incredibly capitalist, monarchical and misogynistic society where people have just been allowed to get away with this, when and that's where Mecca is. And that makes me really sad, because I don't want to give these people money to do my religious pilgrimage, because it's just it's so abhorrent to me, their ideas and how they treat women, because Islam is actually very progressive when it comes to women's rights, and then just to see that broken down completely, it's very stressful to me. So I think that absolute dis between culture and religion is really hard to balance, and I can absolutely see why that puts somebody off or influences what they think. When it comes to people who say things like evolution can't be true or the Big Bang can't be true, it's like, are you really reading this book very literally, or are you assuming that we will have if you read for example in the Quran, you read that everything was created in 7 days. You are meant to believe in the metaphor, and you're meant to believe that you wouldn't be able to see evidence of that. It's more like a way of showing you perhaps the prioritization of everything that's been created, but it's not meant to be literal 7 days, And so I find it very, very, very grating, I think, when people are oh, the scientists don't know what they're talking about. It's all in here, and it all contradicts, and I'm like, what do you think?
I wouldn't actually be able to give you a lot of background, because I actually grew up, as I said, not for very long within my very strict Hindu community. Traveled around the world, so I witnessed a lot of stuff. But personally, I don't see religion and science as combining, if that makes sense. Let people have their faith, have something that drives it. For me, faith is having something that drives you, motivates you every day, helps you take on what comes your way. And so for example, I have faith in what my mom teaches me. I believe she knows everything. She's very smart. She just knows how to adult. So I have a lot of faith in her. And when she says things are going to be okay, I know things are going to be okay. So for me, religion is about having faith in something that helps you move forward every day. And science, on the other hand, is a study of the natural world, a way to understand things that's happening around us. So I don't actually see them coming together. But obviously, there's a lot of debate around science and religion not meeting, science and religion opposing each other, being on complete ends of the spectrum. So for that, I think each needs to open up its arms to the other, have a mutual understanding of the world. What would your opinion be on it?
Oh gosh, that's a big world question that I don't think I can tackle. But I think my faith, for example, I personally think that our current religious leaders should put some kind of ruling in place that unless necessary we should be eating less meat, because we have so much scientific evidence that our overconsumption of meat is really impacting the planet, the farming of beef and all the deforestation and all of that stuff. For example, when scientific evidence came out that smoking was so bad for your health, it was because alcohol is banned for the same reason that it's addictive and it's bad for you. Smoking was also banned, but equally it was recognized that when that ruling came into place, the people who had already started smoking are addicted to it, and so it would be very hard for them to quit. The kind of meshing the two together almost in recognizing what that addiction was. At least in Islamic history, I think Islam has had a fairly good scientific history. There was a great exhibition at the Science Museum maybe 10 years ago called 1001 Scientific Islamic Inventions. That really inspired me in terms of showing me that when Europe was in the Dark Ages, a lot of the ideas that came floating around in the Renaissance started in the Islamic Empire. I learnt the name Jabir bin Hayyan, who was actually a contemporary of the 6th Imam, so I mentioned those 12 Imams, and Jabir bin Hayyan is where we get the word gibberish from, because of the fact that when they were translating his work, they couldn't understand him. So it's never been a sort of historical contradiction, so I think we need to sort of go back to that kind of time where it wasn't like a big argument. Not saying that we should go back to history to solve all of our problems, maybe looking into how they came across that would be wonderful.
Definitely back to when it was an exchange of knowledge, because I remember how a lot of mathematical concepts emerged in Hindu or Muslim communities, and it was passed on to the West, and then they learned things and they passed it on by traveling.
And I'm glad that we don't have Roman numerals rather than Arabic numerals, because Roman numerals confuse me to no end.
Oh, for sure.
Do you think we could learn from religious communicators in our science communication? I think definitely, because I think obviously as we've been talking in science communication a lot about breaking into certain communities who perhaps haven't had that much access to science or a higher level of science education, I think having a dialogue with religious leaders would be very important in, passing on health messages and, empowering the people within those communities to pursue science. Definitely.
Yeah.
What do you think, Ushashi?
I would say we have definitely a lot to learn from religious leaders. And when you look at people who are preaching, or when there's a large religious ceremony, you notice that these leaders have a lot of power. They dictate how the audience listens to them, communicates with them. They are great orators. They have great public personas in a way. And I think that's definitely something that is applicable to science communication, where we are more articulate in how we communicate science. So that is a place I could definitely see religious leaders and their ability to convince people to come into science communication.
Yeah.
It's very powerful.
When I was growing up, one of the speakers was called Mehdi Hassan, and he would do these really incredible talks, and I remembered him. And since then, he's become a really big journalist for Al Jazeera, and he lives in Washington now, and he's a really, really big journalist. And so I think it's definitely proof that those skills of talking on a pulpit and explaining such complex religious ideas can easily transfer onto explaining people how the hell the US elections work and that kind of thing. So I definitely think there is some crossover there.
With each passing day, I think there's a movement, there's growing civil understanding about a lot of things. There's so many movements that's happening. There's so much effort in trying to understand one another.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fatima and Ushashi. Straight after we spoke to Fatima, she said she went downstairs and saw her parents live streaming a lecture from her mosque by a scientist explaining COVID-19 vaccines. So there we go, science and religion in action. I have another of our colleagues here now, Naomi, who actually I met on our first day of this course, didn't we?
Yeah.
So a very special person to me. So Naomi, tell us a bit about your scientific background and then also your religious background.
So my undergraduate I did at Cardiff Uni, and I did physics and music.
Ooh.
And I have always been a Christian. I was born into a Christian family. I'd say that when I was starting to explore science in my teenage years, I had a lot of doubt about my faith, mainly because I didn't think they were compatible. But now I'd say that I'm much more Christian than I've ever been, to be honest. I'm stronger in my faith than I was, and I really see science and religion as going hand in hand. So.
Oh, wow. And your degree, I mean, I remember the first time you told me what you studied, I was like, wow, and I'm sure a lot of people are intrigued. So physics and maths, and did you find religion playing into that at all? Did you explore any religious concepts within that, or at university was it very separate for you? And how did you find that within your kind of colleagues on that course?
I think, sorry, was that physics and music or physics and religion?
Physics and music and religion.
Okay. I think I was the only Christian out of the 5 of us who were doing physics and music. Or if they weren't very vocal about it. But actually, I've noticed that as you go through academia, while people in the younger or in the lower areas of physics and they're just starting out, there are a lot more atheists across the board. But as you progress up through academia, there are more people who are a lot more open to what's possible and what they believe. So yeah.
And you said, initially you had doubts. Was that kind of as a teenager when you were first learning about science, or?
Yeah, I was like, how is this possible? None of it makes sense. It's not logical. But I now don't see, like, you don't need to have logic to experience faith. I mean, that's the definition of faith. So,
and do you agree with what Fatima was saying about metaphor within religion? Is that how you perceive things?
Yeah, completely. I don't know if you saw, but I was nodding to everything that Fatima was saying. I agreed with everything pretty much. Yeah, I personally believe both in the Big Bang and evolution, and in the Bible I believe that it can be interpreted as metaphorical. I also believe that with evolution, for example, it follows the same order in which it is in the Bible, which I think that's so cool. They go hand in hand there. And I also really agreed with Fatima's point on the climate and the environment. I believe in Genesis, the book of Genesis, God gives humans dominion over all the earth, and I believe that means that we need to look after the earth. This is a gift given to us by God, and we need to look after it and show we appreciate it and show it the love that God loves us. So
And you mentioned before we discussed this that you've had lots of discussions about this very topic, science and religion. Who does that tend to come up with? Is it kind of friends or curious colleagues, or?
Curious colleagues. I'd say in my undergraduate I was quite open about my faith. I was the annoying person who invited people to like all these kind of lunches that talked about these kinds of things. So yeah, it was lots of people just kind of asked, so how do you both believe in both? And I would go off on one on that. So
Great. Well, it was lovely to speak to you briefly, Naomi. We'll be coming back to you after our next song, which is your choice, one of your choices. You gave me many to choose from, but I've gone for the one that got the most eager replies in the group chat. So this is Hunger by Florence and the Machine.
At 17, I started to starve myself. I thought that love was a kind of emptiness, and at least I understood then the hunger I felt, and I didn't have to call it loneliness. We all have a hunger. 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 Tell me what you need. Oh, you look so free. The way you use your body, baby. Come on and work it for me. Don't let it get you down. You're the best thing I've seen. We never found the answer, but we knew one thing. We all have a hunger. 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 And it's Friday night and it's kicking in, and I can't dress. They're gonna crucify me. Oh, but you and all your vibrant youth. How could anything bad ever happen to you? You make a fool of death with your beauty, and for a moment I thought that love was in the drugs, but the more I took, the more it took away, and I could never get enough. I thought that love was on the stage. You give yourself to strangers. You don't have to be afraid. Then it tries to find a home with people. Oh, when I'm alone, picking it apart and staring at your phone. your beauty, and for a moment I forget to worry.
Hello, that was Hunger by Florence and the Machine, which was my choice because I think we're all searching for things. I am joined in the studio now by Ushashi. It's nice to see you. I really liked your chat with Fatima. That was really interesting.
Thank you.
So yeah, let's go.
Yeah, so I mean, in our discussions before, you've said that, like, we all know that it is infamously believed that science and religion are incompatible. What is your opinion on that as someone who studied physics but is also a Christian?
Well, that's what people believe. That's what people think. But I think it's actually the people with the most controversial opinions that shout the loudest. So you hear, I don't know, about the Christian Americans in the deep South America justifying anti-vax beliefs using their Christian faith, for example. And then you have the four horsemen of the atheist apocalypse, like Richard Dawkins, Peter Atkins, who said that science and religion are incompatible. Dawkins went on to say that religion is evil and totally against science. And Nietzsche said, God is dead and science has buried him. But I really don't see that kind of way. I think if you say God of the gaps, if you use God to justify things that can't be explained by science, that's not what faith is. Faith is a completely different plane to what I see around me. I think I said, or I believe that science, you're finding out the how things work around you, and faith is my purpose. That's what I believe.
That's interesting. I'd love to hear your opinion on that. And previously in our conversation, you also said that you see science as the how and religion as the why. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
So, yeah, there is kind of a famous analogy, I'm stealing this from somebody, about a cake. So, I don't know, there could be a cake that looks delicious, beautifully iced, everything like that. A scientist can look at this cake, they could cut it open, they could decipher what went into it, time used to bake it, all the different, you could go into what atoms are in there, everything to do with the cake.
Yeah.
But you would never know the reason why that cake was made. Only the creator of the cake can say, oh, well, I made this for my friend's birthday party. The scientists wouldn't be able to see that from just looking at the cake alone. So that's how I see science and faith.
Aw, I mean, yeah, that's a great way to put it. I mean, everyone likes cake. Yeah, that was really interesting. Thank you. Yeah.
So, what do you think, Ushashi, what do you think science can learn from religion?
Well, I did mention before about how, like, science communicators can learn from those who, like, preach religion, about how articulate they are, how eloquent they are in how they talk about their religion and their faith. That is something that can definitely, you can apply to science communication. But what I've also noticed is that religion and faith invokes very, very strong emotions in very large groups of people at once.
Yeah.
And obviously it will be interesting to get to the root of that and you apply that to science as well and see how we can work from a grassroots level to invoke similar passionate emotions in people about scientific knowledge, how we learn information about the world through science. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of opportunity for each of them to learn from the other, and they don't have to be at each other's throats.
Yeah, really. I totally agree with that.
Yeah. What about you? What do you think religion can learn from science?
I think being able to look critically. I think it's important for anyone to have that. Obviously, you have faith, but being able to just, justify what you believe, and that solidifies my faith, actually, being able to justify it. And also just seeing things from other people's perspectives. So we know science is such a collaborative area, and science doesn't get through unless it's peer reviewed by other people from different backgrounds who also study the same thing. So yeah, I believe that religious people should also just have perspective on other people's faiths and beliefs, and be much more informed about the world around them.
Yeah. I mean, like, over the past few years, I've learned that science and art are two ways of looking at the world. They're kind of like two sides of the same coin. And now, having done this discussion and having thought about it, I feel like science and religion are also two ways of looking at the world. And neither has to be wrong. It's just there's definitely opportunity for more openness and exchange of knowledge between the two fields.
Yeah, I totally agree. In fact, I think a lot of critics of religious people come from the fact that it's blind faith, but actually I think it's the same kind of faith I see in both my science and in my religious part. I see the world as the evidence around me, and I use that to kind of justify my faith. But also with scientific evidence, you have to make a little leap of faith from the data to get to a conclusion, and I don't see them as being completely different.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely going to be a journey to attain the truth, you know? There's science, there's religion, there's art, there's so many ways you can get to that one truth that we don't know what it is, but we're all getting there. We're all getting there. And now we have a song. It's the title track of his newest studio album. If you can't tell that I'm a fan, here is Wonder by Shawn Mendes.
How I feel, I wonder, wouldn't it be nice to live inside a world that isn't black and white? I wonder what it's like to be my friends. Hope that they don't think I'll forget about them. I wonder. Right before I close my eyes, the only thing that's on my mind, been dreaming that you feel it too. I wonder what it's like to be loved by you. Yeah, I wonder what it's like. I wonder what it's like to be loved by you. Why I'm so afraid of saying something wrong I never said I was a saint. I wonder, when I cry into my hands, I'm conditioned to feel like it makes me less of a man. And I wonder if someday you'll be by my side and tell me that the world will end up alright. I wonder, right before I close my eyes, the only thing that's on my mind, been dreaming that you feel it too. I wonder what it's like to be loved by you. Yeah, I wonder what it's like. I wonder what it's like to be loved by you.
And we are back in the studio. Thank you, Shawn Mendes. We're back in the studio with Keegan, our newsreader.
Hey.
Also a student on the science communication unit. So Keegan, what are your views on the amalgamation of science and religion?
Well, I suppose I should say a little bit about what I had growing up and things. A lot of my family's South African, and they're quite religious. And so when I was younger, we did do things like say grace before a meal, and I did go to church, and that kind of thing, or sing hymns and say prayers and stuff like that. But it never really sort of gelled with me, and so I put myself somewhere on that agnostic spectrum as well. I used to say I'm an atheist, and now after thinking about it a little bit more, I feel as though the reasons for which a lot of people say they are atheists is contradictory to saying that you are atheist, because they feel like you can't believe in God without evidence, and yet you are claiming something also without evidence. So I feel like everyone's sort of on an agnostic scale in some way, and I'm sort of towards that end of things.
So what do you mean by spectrum? So like an agnostic spectrum, what is the lowest end of it and what's the highest end of it? Like the distance from God.
Yeah, well, I don't know. It's like the confidence with which you feel it may be one way or the other, in the same way as in science, whether you gather evidence for something, you'd have a certain level of confidence. I'm pretty sure this is how it works, or it's likely, or I'm almost certain, that kind of thing. But I have found I've as I believe Naomi said, as I've gotten older or gone through education more, I have been more open to some sort of religion type thing. And I think the one I'd go towards most is sort of deism, which is the idea that there may be some sort of creator of the universe that started everything off, but to me the idea of a God who can know your thoughts and sinful thoughts and heaven and hell and that kind of thing, I wouldn't go that far.
Right. Yeah, I was talking to Naomi the other day, and she was we kind of discussed about how what if science is the tool that God gave us to understand the world around us, because he couldn't be here himself,
Yeah, I mean, I can totally see that way of seeing things. I mean, to me that conflicts with the sort of established types of religion, like I said earlier, Christianity or Islam or all these different types of religion. I feel as though like claiming that or believing that it is a certain way and not this other way that other people believe maybe it's difficult to say, but I still, like I said, I'd still be open to the idea that there might be something that sets it up. I just feel like we don't know that yet, and then through science we can get closer to that. I wanted to ask you if you've made it clear that you like evidence and to believe something you need to be shown something.
Yeah.
So I was wondering what you thought about morals and morality, and where you think you personally sort of draw that from if it's not from religion.
I would definitely say the real world around me, the upbringing I've had, where there were things there was school, there was my apartment complex, there were family gatherings and other things like that, playgrounds and stuff, and I saw people do things, and for some reason I've always had people in my life who told me what was right and what was wrong, and so I believed what was told to me by higher authorities, but real world authorities. So it could be my father, it could be my mother, it could have been a teacher I really valued. So that's where I drew my morals from people who've had past experience, who've faced things like that, and not put it on someone I don't know. I mean, yeah, God and might be a fun guy. I would love to hang out with him, but I've never met him, so
I've thought about it a lot, which is why I like this course so much, and especially the philosophical hard word sometimes isn't it, side of things. And I sort of thought about this quite nice idea that I like, having done biology, which is that morals might be this sort of embedded biological thing within us. And I feel like a lot of that we have a lot of instinctual feelings about what's right and wrong, and altruism, and you don't want to see your family suffer and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
The sort of, you don't have to be taught that just happens. And so I almost feel in a way that this what leads into this sort of idea of maybe there's a God that set everything going. So all the sort of rules that started evolution and biology and genetics and all of that might be where morals come from. But I don't know. But people often think morals and science are separate. But maybe they're intertwined and we just don't realize it yet.
They could be, yeah. I mean, that's definitely a new perspective of looking at things. And in the 21st century, I feel like we have to be more open about how we understand each other. Have you read any books or listened to any podcasts that talk about religion and science and things like that?
Yeah, well, I spend quite a lot of time trawling YouTube for things like that. I am quite a big Dawkins fan.
Right.
Although, I'll caveat with saying I feel as though sometimes his discussions with religious people about religion I don't really understand what the point of that is. I'm not sure what it's adding necessarily, but his books like The Selfish Gene, for example, which gives you a reason for why altruism might exist, because you're trying to preserve your genes in other people and stuff like that, and how that ties into morality and your values. I think that's really interesting. That's the kind of what I was going for earlier. So I do find his views very, very interesting on it, yeah.
Would you recommend something like that for our audience, like something that you've read or heard that you think other people should be aware of?
Yeah, well, yeah, The Selfish Gene, great book. It's pretty old, but definitely worth a read, especially if you're on this course, because it's a celebrity scientist, popular science kind of thing.
But thank you, Keegan, for being here tonight. It was great talking to you, hearing your views on this. And hello, Polly.
Hello. We've just done a very quick switcheroo there. Keegan got kicked out of the out of the studio very quickly there.
Yes.
So thank you, Shashi, and thank you to all of our amazing guests this week. We were all sitting outside just then, being very pensive about this topic. I think there's so much we could talk about, and maybe it's something we should revisit as well next term.
For sure.
But definitely really appreciate everybody's views on this. So that's it for the show this week, and it's our last chance to record in the studio this week live. So next week we've got some plans that are not concrete yet, but some sort of Christmas extravaganza will be occurring. One of our course mates, I won't reveal who yet, has been reading a book about the mathematics of Christmas. So I'm sure you will all be dying to hear that one, and maybe I'll whip out another couple of quiz questions too. So check us out next week when we'll be uploading that episode. So see you then, and have a good Christmas if I don't speak to you live before then.